Let's go. Our guest today has a passion for data science, machine learning, bioinformatics, research, and teaching. He's earned a PhD in medical technology from Mahidol University in 2006, where he was awarded the Excellent Thesis Award by the National Research Council of Thailand. Among many other pursuits, he is also an associate professor of bioinformatics and the head of the Center of Data Mining and Biomedical Informatics at Mahidol University, where he leads a research laboratory that harnesses data science for unraveling the hidden knowledge of big data in medicine. In over a decade and a half, he's published more than 100 research articles, reviewed articles and book chapters, and has been invited as a visiting professor at many universities, including one I am very familiar with, Cal State Fullerton. However, you may recognize him from YouTube, where he's gained nearly 100,000 subscribers across his two channels, The Data Professor and The Coding Professor. So please help me in welcoming our guest today, a man with a mission to educate the world about data science, the data professor himself, Dr. Chanin Nantasenamat. Chanin, thank you so much for coming on the show today, man. I appreciate you being here. I know it's quite late for you in Thailand, so I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be here, man.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for the awesome introduction. Yeah, it sounded like a boxing match. Yeah, your introduction is so cool. Awesome.
Thanks, man. Thanks, man. Yeah, definitely, man. You know, I do 100% absolutely deserve it, man, because you put out so much good content, so much good work, man. I remember using some of your resources to help overcome hurdles that I was facing when I was learning some stuff and stuff that, you know, I still come back to for additional help on. So I appreciate you doing all that. Before we get into some of your content and you know, get your views on data science, where data science is headed and all that stuff, let's get to know you a little bit better. Talk to us a bit about where you grew up and what it was like there.
Right. So I grew up in the US, in California, and actually in Los Angeles. So, and then like it was like about I went there like when I was 4. Went to elementary, went to high school, and then I took the equivalent examination, California High School Proficiency Examination, which is like the equivalence of a high school diploma. And then I went back to Thailand. I entered university there, and then I got my bachelor's in biological science, and then I did my PhD in medical technology. And then I've been a professor for the past 14 and a half years. And I started my YouTube channel 2 years ago, and yeah, so we're here today.
That's crazy, man. I didn't know you grew up in California. That's actually where I'm from as well. So I'm from
Awesome.
Sacramento, yeah, from Sacramento, California. And actually, I went to Cal State Fullerton for my undergrad back in man, I'm dating myself here, but that was like 2003, maybe 2003, something like that. So quite a long time ago, man. That's real cool. So what took you back to Thailand? Was that just you know, family? I'm assuming like your background is Thai. Like what brought you back to Thailand?
Yeah, so like at the time my dad was in Thailand. I mean he migrated back to Thailand. My brother was in the university there, and so I had to migrate back to Thailand as well. And then I did my college there. I almost had a chance to go to community college in Irvine Valley College, and then planning on doing a bachelor's degree there at UC Irvine, like a transfer. Yeah, but then we moved back to Thailand first.
Yeah, I actually took a class or two at Irvine Valley College. I think it was like a biology class
Oh,
or
cool.
something, just
Right.
to make up some classes in between sessions because I was a horrible student and
Right.
flunked a lot of classes because I just did not go. But so how different is your life now than what you thought it would be growing up?
Yeah, so like when I grew up, yeah. So actually growing up, I was pretty hooked to the TV show Bill Nye the Science Guy, and so I think that I got motivated to get into science because of that show. I mean, he's a very talented educator, and at the time there were no such thing as YouTube. So I think that's like the most closest thing to like, science entertainment. Fast forward at, like at the time when I was starting my YouTube channel, like my daughter, she gave me an idea, like why don't you start a channel? Because at the time she was, like watching some kids YouTube channel. And then at the time I was thinking of a YouTube name. I mean, like my name is very, very long, like Chanin Nantasenamat, right? So I don't think anyone would be able to remember that. And then at first I thought of getting a name like Data Guy. I think that someone had that name already. And then, like one day it just hit to me like, okay, I'm working as a professor, so why not Data Professor? And so, yeah, and then I used Data Professor as my ID name on YouTube. And yeah,
That's pretty
so I
cool, man.
never had thought that I would be a YouTuber. Like at the first, like at the first impression there, it's like I could remember that some of my students were kind of like surprised. It's like, wow, you're doing YouTube.
That's cool, man. Your daughter is the one that kicked off the idea for you to do that. When it comes to like making YouTube videos, what is your most favorite part about making the YouTube videos, and what is the part that you just kind of like the least?
Okay. So my favorite part would have to be, like making new friends. Like for example, you, Ken, and Danny Ma. Like all of the great YouTubers, and it's always a pleasure to learn from all of you. Also from the awesome audience as well. So, like all the comments, all the suggestion, whether good or bad, like I try to incorporate that and use it as like a lesson to improve upon. Because, like there's a lot of things that I don't know, like content creation, video editing, graphics, you know, blogging, all of that I pretty much like learned from the internet as well. Yeah. Like
Yes.
making YouTube videos by learning it from YouTube.
Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
super meta. That's super meta, man. Uh, so what about your least favorite part? So what part of it is the toughest? Is it just that the the editing and the blogging and stuff like that, or is there some parts of it where you're just like, oh man, I hate doing this?
I wouldn't say that I hate doing. I mean, I don't think there would be anything that I hate about it, but it's just like there are things that I think I could improve upon. Like at the beginning, like my very first or a couple of videos, it took me like entire week to edit the video, and then like over time, I pretty much like learned the tips and tricks. I could maybe customize my keyboard, and then like kind of like playing video games. When you play video games, you have like keyboard shortcuts. So I have that for Adobe Premiere Pro. Like for
Nice.
example, I would use only two buttons, like the Z and the X for cutting and for ripple editing. So after cutting, like it'll combine the clips, like just the two keyboard shortcuts. So I would use my mouse, highlight the area, cut, ripple, and after that, I dabble, like using Python to do automatic editing for, like deleting clips that are having like very low audio, and then cutting that out, piecing it together. And I mean, that made my editing super fast. It would take maybe 10 minutes for editing or 20 minutes. Yeah.
Man, that's pretty cool using Python to clip out like the low audio portions.
Right.
That's something that I might need to get the source code from you for to do that, man.
Sure.
That make life a lot easier. So let's get into kind of bioinformatics at first. That's not something
Sure.
I'm very familiar with. So
Mhm.
kind of like at a high level, like what is bioinformatics and how did you get into that?
Right. So bioinformatic is, like essentially you're taking informatics approach, computer science, in order to make sense of biological data. And so, like the term bio and informatics is essentially biology and the interface of biology with informatics. And so, how do you do that? Like, for example, you could develop tools, you could perform data analysis, you could, um, like there's a subtle difference between bioinformatics and computational biology. And like my good friend, I've also tweeted about like a recent article that we published together. His name is Dr. Malik. And so he suggested to me, like there are subtle differences between bioinformatics and computational biology. Like bioinformatics would be like a computer scientist who developed bioinformatics tool, and a computational biology or computational biologist would be someone who would make use of the bioinformatic tools that computer scientists have developed and then solve biological problems, make sense of biological data. And so, yeah, there are some granularity differences between the two. And so in a nutshell, like we're trying, like for me personally, I'm trying to use bioinformatics, data science in order to design new drugs. So for drug discovery.
That's super fascinating. I would love to kind of, get into that. Yeah, that's a great breakdown of what bioinformatics was. That really helps me kind of understand it. I used to be a biostatistician for a while. So just hearing like the name bioinformatics, biostatistics, I thought maybe they're similar or related, but turns out they're actually vastly different from your description here. So I guess through that coursework that you did for bioinformatics, it sounds like it really did set you up quite well for a foundation in data science. Was there like any additional upskilling that you had to do in machine learning or data science topics? And if there was any additional upskilling, what was your process like to acquire that knowledge?
Well, that's a great question. So actually, I've never taken any structured curriculum, even in bioinformatics. So all of that are pretty much self-taught. So I had my bachelor's degree in biological science. So it's similar to a pre-med program. But the thing is, like at first I thought I would become a medical doctor after my undergraduate. But then, like some of my friends, when they graduated, they went on to do MD. For me, at first I wanted to change my degree totally. Like I was in my fourth year, I wanted to change to a computer science major. But then I thought to myself, I'm almost graduating, so like one more semester left, so I might as well graduate with a biology degree. And so at the time, like I always have this passion for computer gadgets. I would like to build computers on my own, like upgrade and build from scratch. And yeah, so I never thought that I would enter the field of data science. So it pretty much came to me after I graduated PhD. No, actually during my PhD. So like during my second year, I came to know about data mining from a mentor who just graduated from RPI in the US. He was doing data mining research. And so that was back in 2005. I heard the term data mining. And then from there, he gave me a book. I self-study from that book. And then like during PhD, there's a lot of self-studying. Like it's not like at the time, data mining is such a new field, even for Thailand and even I guess for the whole world as well. And so I pretty much like Googled. There were no YouTube videos at the time. I hit the library. Like I discovered that if I perform tutorials, like from the first page into the last page of a book, it didn't really help. It didn't click. And so what I did was I selectively selected particular chapters that would help me to solve specific problems. And then based on my own biological problems, data problem that I would like to solve, I would Google for solutions specifically. And then over time, it kind of magically fall into place. Like I didn't really have a structured approach to learning. So it's pretty much like, like you have a problem, you Google for it, you find a solution, either from a book, either from an ebook, from a tutorial, and then you solve that problem. And then over the span of 3 years of the PhD, I would have solved maybe 100 small problems. And then, that 100 small problem, it pretty much fall into, like specific domains. And if you could cluster it, like for example, it'll fall into like data splitting, data clustering, feature selection, machine learning algorithm selection. So I mean, if you look back, it kind of structured into a well-defined area. And I think for beginners in the field, I always, like believe that it's always possible to break into data mining or data science if you have the passion for it. I mean, the journey is not going to be easy. So like the immediate gratification for me is, like being able to solve the problem that gives me big joy. And it's kind of like give me like this boost. So whenever I feel down, I would feel better if I could solve small problems. And so for the span of 3 to 4 years, like hundreds of problems solved, and that kept me motivating and going. And at the time, like being a professor for 10 years, publishing, it kind of felt a bit boring, like things are becoming more repetitive. You publish, your paper gets published somewhere, but then you're unsure whether people are seeing your work. It's like you're unsure whether the work that you're doing, is anyone reading about it, And so YouTube pretty much give instant feedback, like you publish a video and then, there will be a lot of people commenting, suggesting like, this is wrong. Like, I would take that to improve for the future video, or like the fonts that I'm using is too small, okay, I'll increase the font size, or maybe viewers would suggest some improvement to the code. And so I would also learn from that as well.
Love that approach that you took to learning. Like I kind of call that on-demand learning, because it is such a huge, broad field that it's impractical to try to learn everything all at once. So the best way you should learn is actually by doing it. So doing something, and then through the process of doing that something, you're going to inevitably face an issue that you don't know how to do. And you have to go research and figure it out. And then that's how that iterative like learning kind of happens. Maybe iterative is not the word, but cumulative learning kind of happens that way. Oftentimes I get messages from people like, well, what kind of project should I do? Like, what should I research? People message me all the time asking me what they should research for their bachelor's thesis or master's thesis. And I'm like, I don't have an answer for you. Like, you need to find that answer out yourself. Like when people come to you with this type of question, how do I figure out what project I want to do? How do I figure out what I want to research? What advice do you typically give to them?
Right. So I would give the advice, like, for example, everyone, I believe they have their own strong points. No one is perfect. Like the thing is, what are you good at? What domain are you coming from? Let's say if someone is coming from biology, then figure out a biological problem and then apply data science to solve that. I mean, if someone's coming from economics background, I'm sure there's a lot of economic related problems that they could solve. So if you solve something that pertains to your own field of knowledge that you have deep knowledge in, I think that will give you immediate gratification. I mean, like immediate joy if you could solve it. And I think it's about pushing the boundaries further and further. Like there's a lot to learn about. So it's always great to be able to have problems and then, make solutions to that. And, also sharing that solution to peers and then learn as a community.
I love that advice, because you're taking like previous knowledge that you've already kind of have a good core competency in, and then you're using that to push yourself to learn something new. So when you do kind of hit those moments of, oh man, like I don't know anything, like imposter syndrome moments, then you're like, oh, actually I do know this thing. I just need to learn how to take this thing and apply it to that, right? It kind of helps with that momentum and helps with that confidence as you're moving through it. Thanks so much for sharing that. Now I want to get into, you mentioned drug discovery a little bit earlier. Let's talk about that real quick, man. Like what is drug discovery? How are drugs discovered? In my mind, it's just like mad scientists in the lab mixing things into a pot and having all these things blow up. Is that like mixing chemicals and stuff? Is there more to drug discovery than that?
Right. So I would believe that it's kind of like in, was it Dexter? There's like a cartoon on Cartoon Network. So like we would imagine drug discovery would be something like that, like a mad scientist, right? But in reality, it's not like a one-person team. So drug discovery is a team effort, and most likely is advancing very rapidly in academia, in industry more. In academia, like their progress will be a bit slower because of limited funding. Like big pharma, like what Pfizer, AstraZeneca, there will be teams of hundreds of scientists, coming from traditional wet lab and also computational lab as well, like working together. And, to get a drug to market, I mean, one drug would come from maybe thousands of chemical ideas in order to come up with one drug. And the cost of getting that drug to the market, it takes at least maybe $1 billion, and it takes more than 10 years to do that. So yeah.
Where does data science kind of enter into the mix here? Like we're talking about chemicals and
Right.
stuff like that. Like how does data science kind of fit into the mix here?
Right. Great question. So there's a field called cheminformatics. So, like in bioinformatics, you have biology and informatics. Cheminformatics, you have chemistry and informatics. So actually, sometimes I use it interchangeably. Biology and cheminformatics are quite related. There's a field called biochemistry, like chemistry pertaining to biological science. And so the thing is, like if you could quantitate chemical compounds into numerical descriptor, that is where you essentially take the numerical descriptor and then you could apply machine learning algorithm. So essentially you apply the same data analytic methods, the same data science process to that. So the thing is to take a compound, a chemical compound, and then make that into quantitative or qualitative description.
So what's that data kind of look like? Is that like tabular data? Is that like unstructured data? How would we kind of just kind of to have like a mental representation of how we quantify chemical data? Like what would that look like if we were to
Right.
look at a table? What would the
Right.
rows and
So
columns be, I guess?
yeah. Yeah, like for example, if you have a data set, like okay, you have the name of the compound, okay, like for example, aspirin, and then there's another chemical representation. It's called Smiles notation, SMILES. I can't remember the full name, but it essentially is a representation of the chemical structure in one dimension. Like for example, C equal would be carbon double bond. Oxygen would be O. So C equal to O would be carbon double bond oxygen. And so it essentially tells the connectivity of the atoms in a molecule. And so if you quantitate that, there's a Python library called RDKits. You could compute molecular descriptor out of the Smiles notation. And then once you have the molecular descriptor, you apply machine learning to build a model.
That's super fascinating, man. So, do you have like any interesting use cases or studies you can share with us that talk about the involvement of machine learning and drug discovery, like a friendly easy to read paper or maybe one of your YouTube videos if you got something like that?
Right. Yeah. So my on my YouTube channel, I have a playlist. I call it the Bioinformatic playlist. And so in that playlist, I have several bioinformatic related content. Like the first few video in the playlist would be the first 6 video. I call it the Bioinformatic from Scratch series. And so that started from the basic, like how to collect your own biological data set from the internet. And like anyone, you don't need to have a biology background. If you just follow the tutorial step by step, you could collect a unique biological data set to make analysis on. And in part 2 to part 6, I've shown how to calculate the descriptor, how to build the model, and finally how to build a web application using the Streamlit library, and then eventually deploy that on Heroku or on Streamlit Cloud.
Dude, that's super cool. I think I might actually do that. So part of my job at Comet is to create cool projects using the Comet software because we do a lot of experimentation management type of stuff. So I think I might go through your YouTube tutorial series, build out a project, write about it, and stuff like that. I think that would be awesome if you don't mind if I do that. I think
Awesome.
that'd be really cool.
That would be
So
cool.
yeah, we'll be in touch regarding that definitely. Uh, so can machine learning in in drug discovery, can that ever like bypass the need to run like a clinical trial? Is that kind of an absurd idea to have, or is that possible? Have there been cases where that happened?
Yeah. So clinical trials is required, like to figure out like the safety of a putative drug in humans. So that would take a couple of years, and it would have to involve enrolling several cohort of people to test the efficacy of the drug. But there is another area that data science could help streamline the entire drug discovery process, which is to take existing drug that you have in the market, but then to find a novel indication, a novel therapeutic indication. Like for example, if I have a antibacterial drug, let's say I use data science, cheminformatics, and then I figure out another indication, meaning that I figure out another treatment that the antibacterial drug could be used as a anti-cancer drug. And so what that means would be I would be able to, like save 10 years of drug discovery effort because I would take an already FDA approved drug and then find a new treatment for that. It's kind of like teaching an old dog a new trick. Because the thing is, like when researchers find an antibacterial drug, they would have performed testings related to only antibacterial. But then they wouldn't have expected that it would also have anti-cancer activity. So they wouldn't have had the opportunity to try that out. But let's say that if computers could be used to perform some sophisticated simulation, so aside from data science, there's a field called like molecular simulation, molecular docking, molecular dynamic, and like using ab initio, like using physics-based algorithm in order to show molecules and proteins, coming together, binding, calculating the interaction energy. And so if via data science combined with molecular simulation approach, if we could find a novel treatment for the existing drug, then that would save 10 years. Yeah.
That's really, really fascinating. Do you know if, of anything that's kind of been released on the market that has used this approach? Is it widely used? Is it commonly used, or is this kind of something that's right now just kind of like a theoretical idea? If that question kind of makes
Yeah,
sense.
so that's a great question. Yeah, so there is a company called In Silico, and I think like in the past 2 years, they published a paper. I'm not sure about how fast it was. Like it was in a matter of months that they found an existing FDA approved drug, and they found a novel treatment. I believe it's related to antibacterial indication. Yeah, I could find a paper and
Oh
share
man.
with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be great, man. That's super cool. Like it's like a
Mhm.
whole side of you know, of the methodology that I'm familiar with that I've never like, get exposed to. So I think it's super cool how there's this combining of disciplines to create these really, you know, amazing use
Mhm.
cases that are really helping humanity. I think that's so cool, man. Um, I mean, speaking of, helping humanity, like you're on this mission to help people develop as data scientists and we talked a little bit about how we got into the YouTubing, but where did that spark to help other data scientists come from?
Yeah. So like for my full-time job, I work as a professor. So one of my everyday duty is to supervise or mentor younger researchers, PhD students, master student, undergraduate student, and also to teach, and also to do research. And so like YouTube is another extension of my passion. So I really like to teach, and like over the course of the past 10 years before I went to YouTube, I felt like that like there are like although I teach every semester, but then like after the semester ended, it kind of felt strange. Like okay, it's like okay, no more class. But on YouTube, it's like you're able to do it over and over again, and so like the fun never stops. Like the party never stops. So like whenever I have something interesting that I heard from somewhere, I would like to share it, to the world, and like being able to engage with the community and learn together. I think that is an awesome experience, and like even as a professor, I never felt that I know everything. There's so much that I don't know, and I'm very open to that as well. And so, like I learn a lot from my students. I learn a lot from the viewers, and learning is a very fun endeavor. And like for example, I think I've remembered hearing for the first time about experimentation monitoring. I think Comet.ml was it?
Yeah. That's where I work.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So like when I went for the first time when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is so cool. It's like you're in biology when you're doing experiments, you would track the experiment, you would keep a notebook, like a physical notebook. And what Comet is doing is essentially that, like, but then you're able to monitor the experiment of machine learning model building. You could visualize, diagnose the model feature, like parameter optimization and all of that, And the great thing is it's much more trackable and reproducible than the actual wet lab experimentation. And actually, 2 years ago, I've written a paper, a review article on the computational reproducibility of drug discovery projects. And in that paper, I argued that a lot of the research in computational drug discovery, they're not reproducible. Like sometimes it's not even in a Python or Jupyter notebook. Some experiment are, like via point and click GUI software. And let's say that if I mistakenly clicked on the wrong button, then that would give the wrong result. So it's not reproducible. And like the things that Comet is doing or other related tool, I think that is a game changer.
So it brings me to an interesting kind of idea, something I've been wrestling with a lot recently, kind of like I don't know, maybe a point of philosophical, I guess, contention or discomfort that I'm feeling is, we call it data science, but how much science is there in data science? Because I feel like there's really two different breeds of data scientists. There's data scientists like yourself that are actually like, doing science and doing research, but then there's data scientists who are in the business and they're in organizations and they're all business minded type of data scientists. And they seem very different to me, and I don't know if the business side, like the business data scientist type of people, if they actually understand the science that they're doing. Like I don't know if that where I'm taking this is making sense, but let me kind of reframe the question as, where is the science in data science?
Yeah. So like maybe from one of the episodes from Bill Nye's the Science Guy, it would have to be the scientific method about the hypothesis forming. Like for example, in business, you would have A/B testing. You would have some hypothesis. You would have some variables. You would have some variables that you fix, and then you would like to see whether that influences the outcome of the experiment. So I would believe that the scientific method would be the science part of data science. And the data could be biology, chemistry, physics, business data, economic, ecology. So I would believe that it's pretty much like a plug and play. Like data could come from many discipline. And then the analytic parts, the machine learning part would be to take that data and then make it into an interpretable model. And like there's so much in data science. Like there's data collection. Before data can be collected, there's research experimentation, research design. I believe in biostatistics, there's so many like Latin, what do you call it, design,
Latin squares, things like
stratification.
that.
Yeah, Latin square. Yeah, stratification, like sampling. All of that forms the core of data science. And then you have, once you have designed the experiment, you have to figure out from which population you would like to sample your data. And then you collect the data. Once you have the data, then you would perform data processing. After that, you would do maybe feature extraction. Like in cheminformatics, you would take a SMILES notation and then you would extract molecular descriptor. If in ecology, maybe you would have some geographical data. If in business, you would have some, like click-through rate data or turnover, or in business or in HR, you would have like churn rates. And so, like the domain-specific variables, I would believe that they're all the same. If I borrow Shakespeare's, like all the world's a stage, and like whatever the data it is, if you're able to represent it and it represents something, they're essentially the same thing. And then you could use analytic methods, machine learning, EDA. I think that's very important. Like recent times, I believe that there's like this hype over deep learning, but then like the classical EDA, the classical linear regression, I think it offers a lot of immense value. EDA also helps you to like make a lot of understanding of the data, and most of the time you don't need deep learning in order to build some meaningful data model. Yeah, EDA basic models would be very effective.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate you like breaking down that process for us. Something I've been really getting into lately has been has been deep learning. Like, I mean, not like an expert at it by any means, but it's something I've just been like intellectually curious about. Um, uh, it's really interesting, man. Like the methodology, from doing a traditional machine learning problem or project to like a deep learning one. The process methodology, I feel like, is a little bit different.
Mhm.
I guess have you worked with both of those? How would you say it's compare and contrast that, if you would, for us?
Right. So like most of the analytic methods that based on our research project, so we don't really have much dive into deep learning. So like our favorite algorithm, like my personal favorite would be random forest. For one thing, it practically works on most of the tabular data, and you don't need to do any uh, feature tuning or parameter optimization, and it essentially works outside the box. And so another great thing I like is the interpretability of the model. So um, like when I'm talking to a biologist or a chemist, and like the first thing that they would ask is what features or what variables are important. And so the best way to explain that to them would be to use random forest, because it provides the Gini index that you could interpret. And another recent addition, very powerful, is the Shapley value. And there's the library called Shap, and it's so good. I really love the visualization that comes out of the library. And in terms of deep learning, I believe there's a lot of unique area. Like for example, GANs, you could use it to generate new molecule. You could use it to train existing data, and then you could generate a new molecule. Same thing as you could generate a new human being, like a photo of a hypothetical person. Yeah, so same thing. It could be used to generate a hypothetical molecule that like chemists wouldn't have thought about. So that
Generative
is an
models,
awesome
yeah.
area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
generative models are so cool, man. Something that uh, I I just like the interplay between deep learning and how it can help like augment human creativity. Um,
Mhm.
there's this awesome book called The Creativity Code by Marcus du Sautoy. Really, really good book that talks about, it's mostly about deep learning, art and innovation, in the age of AI. I'm actually interviewing the author of this book later this week. So
Awesome.
if you guys are
Mm,
if you guys are watching live, tune in on Wednesday for that. Um, so let's talk about a couple of blog posts that you've written. There's one that talks about uh, how to learn anything and why it doesn't actually take 10,000 hours to learn something. I thought that was a
mhm.
great blog post. If you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually, I got that from one of the YouTube videos that I've watched. And I believe he's an author of a book. And from pretty much, I pretty much summarized what I've watched from YouTube. And then he's also an author of a book. Um, so essentially, from that, it's like there's a misconception that in order to learn and master something, you would need 10,000 hours. But then from the video, I believe that it was only what you need 20 hours actually to learn something. But then you would learn something and you would be able to do it at a good level. But in order to become a master, that would require 10,000 hours. But in order to become good in something, 20 hours. Like for
Yeah,
example, to be able to play in the video, he spent maybe 20 hours or so, and he was able to play some simple songs using the ukulele. But then to be a master, like for example, to be a pro golf, like that would probably take 10,000 hours.
yeah. Even like iterations, right? Just 10,000 tries at something. I think is
Hmm.
that's kind of where the learning happens the most. Is just across the iterations where that learning curve really starts to pick up for people. Um,
Hmm.
yes, man. At some point, you got to just stop watching the videos. You got to stop reading the books and just start taking action.
Right.
Um, So, speaking of that, is learning data science the same thing as learning anything else? Do we need a more specialized approach to learning data science? You've got this awesome post about 7 effective tips for studying data science. I guess if you could share some of those tips. I know that we've talked about a few of those kind of throughout the episode, but we can kind of condense it down here as well.
Right. Yeah. So like for myself, I believe that I think there's this awesome concept about the open mindset. No, what's it? The open mindset, the growth mindset.
Growth mindset, yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah.
growth mindset. Yeah. So like if you believe that you could learn something, like it's just a matter of time, then if you're keeping improving 1% at a time, as you have already mentioned, like in a year, let's say, for each day you aim to learn one new topic, so you're improving 1%. In a year, that would amount to what was it, 300%? So like um, I don't think there's a secret recipe to learning, but for one, is I really like to break things down to the individual components. So, like for example, if you're working on a PhD thesis, like it looks like a formidable task. It looks like a wow, But then if you break it down, let's say you break it down into, okay, you break it down into data collection, what you need to do, and then you make it as detailed as possible in data collection, but at the high level as well. You have data collection, you have data, and you have feature or what data processing, you have feature extraction, you have machine learning model building, and then you have model interpretation, and then you have model deployment. And let's say that, okay, in the collection phase, okay, and then you make a list. Which database would you like to collect the data from? And once you have already collected data, what do you want to do with it? It's pretty much like you're going into detail, into the granular detail of that. And then let's say you make like a Gantt chart, and then you could figure out like, okay, for the course of the next 2 to 3 years, you make a chart, and then you plan out your time, and then every week, um, work on getting some percentage done. Like for myself, I would make maybe one iteration would be like maybe 3 months to get one paper published, and then you would iterate again, perform the same uh, cycle again.
I like that approach, just breaking it down to smaller pieces and just manageable, and then just
Mhm.
attack it, just go for
Right.
it. So, it's publishing papers, man, like that must be like a lot of like stress having to do that. Like, what happens, like, if like how do you feel like if you spend all this time like publishing a paper and then maybe it doesn't get accepted, right? For example, Jan LeCun was talking about how he, you know, tried to submit a paper for neuro ips and ended up getting rejected, and he's like, godfather of deep learning. I wondered, how do you deal with those type of situations?
Yeah. So in like publication, like the obvious first thing would be you have to get comfortable with rejection because 99% maybe it will be rejection and 1% would be acceptance. So if you're comfortable with failure, you're confident with rejection, then you would enjoy the process, right? So the gratification would not be from getting published, but the gratification would be from learning. And publishing would be an end product, would be some one, like of many things that you will acquire in addition to the knowledge that you would have gained. But then, there must be publication as well. Like, for example, if someone is doing a PhD or someone would want to be promoted to, like assistant professor or associate professor, then getting published is also quite tricky as well. Like you would also need research funding. You would also need to hire or convince talented individuals to pursue a PhD in order to help advance the group research project. And so it's very, I would believe it is a very stressful area if you're aiming to publish in order to flourish in the academic system. But then there is this joy of publishing just for the sense of finding new knowledge. So one of the great thing in academia would be so you would be able to explore some area that would be interesting to you. But then in my duty as the head of the Center of Data Mining, so not only that, then I also have to manage the center, looking at the strategy, looking at the KPI, and so there are some granularity about that as well. So um, and yeah, I guess KPI, getting funded, publishing, like you have to get at least how many papers per year. I think that would be stressful as well. So yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. But I like, I guess, the main takeaway there when it comes to creating work and pushing that work out to the world is actually to just enjoy the process of doing the work itself, make the objective of learning and writing kind of the focus of your efforts. Let go of, whether or not anybody's going to publish it. That's not up to you. Just let go of that, but just focus on doing the thing that you are in the middle of doing to the best of your absolute ability. I think that's an important point there. Um, let's start winding this down, man. Let's do one last kind of what I call a formal question, then we're gonna jump into the random round. So this question is: it is 100 years in the future. What do you want to be remembered for?
Wow. 100 years into the future. Oh, let's see. That's tricky. I'm not sure. Probably as a um, I'm thinking. I'm not sure. If I could find a niche in data science, contribute to that niche, that would be awesome.
Definitely, man. I think this the work you're doing here, bioinformatics with data science, machine learning, drug discovery. I'm excited to see where you take this and how far you go down to this niche. Let's go into a real quick random round here. I guess first,
Hmm.
I think a good question to kick off with is, what when it comes to the future of
Yeah.
data science and machine learning, what applications are you most excited about in the field of drug discovery or bioinformatics? Like what kind of gets you hyped up when you think about it?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier on about the drug repositioning, like the ability to use data science in order to find a new indication for drug. I think that is a very interesting area to pursue at the moment. Another would be using generative modeling to create new molecules. And another, I really like it because of the data visualization aspect, is to apply graph network in order to analyze protein-protein interaction data and also protein compound interaction data. And like being able to visualize all of that would also be able to help perform data, we call it drug repositioning. Because of the interaction between, like, for example, you have protein A and molecule A, protein B, molecule A, and then you get to see all of that interaction in a network, kind of like a spider web, like the World Wide Web. Like each website would be like one protein, and how do they interact with one another? And so all of that complicated interaction, if you could find a way to visualize that in a graph network, that fascinated me.
That's super interesting. Definitely gonna have to look into that. Drug repositioning. That I'm trying to clarify the definition of that. Is that when you find new applications, new use cases for a drug? Yeah.
Exactly.
So, what are you currently reading?
Oh, great. I'm currently listening to Audible Mastery by Robert Greene. And like the more I listen to that, it's like, wow, it kind of hit hard. Like you're finding an area that you're passionate about, and you're exploring areas, like without the influence of other people. Like for example, growing up, my dad has a lot of influence on my education. Like me going into pre-med program. Was also influenced by my dad. I mean, he practically researched all of the data. He also did the same for my brother as well. Like my older brother, he went to UC Irvine, and then he went to UC Riverside. He did electrical engineering, and then he did his MBA degree. And like for me, he also researched about biology, like exploring medical technology, and he suggested, okay, why don't you do a PhD here? So that's just pretty cool.
I love that book, Mastery. That's like the book I've got it on Audible. I've got the full book, and then Robert Greene also has concise versions of his book, which are just real short books that like summaries of his book that you can read maybe in an hour or 2 hours. And that's one that I always go back to. Actually, you should tune into the interview I've done with Robert Greene. I've actually interviewed him.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. I'll listen to that.
Yeah. It's he said during that interview that was one of the most interesting interviews he's ever had. So
cool.
That's my claim to fame right there, man. So, what song do you currently have on repeat?
Wow. Let's see. What song? Actually, not myself, but my daughter, Blackpink. There's a new song called La Lisa.
Okay.
K-pop
Okay.
group.
All right, I'm gonna check that out.
Blackpink. Yeah, Blackpink. La Lisa. Okay. And the lead singer, Lisa, is a Thai also.
Nice. That's awesome. I'll check that out. Yeah, I always like getting new music from my guests to tune into. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open up a random question generator. So let's go ahead and pull this up. All right, let's go for it. First question here is, what are your pet peeves?
Pet peeves. Let's see. Great question. Not sure.
You're not disturbed by anything. No worries. Let's jump to another one then.
Yeah.
Do you have any nicknames?
Yeah, my Thai nickname would be Earl.
Earl?
Earl, yeah.
I like that.
And the Thai way of pronouncing it would be earn.
Okay.
Like
nice.
Earning money, earn. Yeah.
What talent would you show off in a talent show?
Talent show off in a talent show. Alto saxophone.
Oh, really? You play that?
Yeah, I played alto, and I have a soprano at home as well.
That's awesome, man. That's pretty cool.
During band in sixth, seventh, eighth grade.
That's cool, man.
Cool.
When was the last time you changed your opinion about something major?
Oh, okay. Something major. I think the perception of what is success. Like before, like success would like superficially feel like, okay, you have to advance in your academic career. Like, okay, getting assistant professor, going up the career ladder. But then, like I just figure out like, sometimes it doesn't really matter. Like it's just something that other people view you as. But the thing is, are you happy with that? Are you content with that? So like I learned to be happy with like the everyday things in life, and just being grateful, like for the friendship, for the opportunity. Um, you know, like for example, being here today, I'm very happy, and like being in the moment. Like it doesn't require anything fancy, and just enjoy life.
Absolutely love that, man. Yeah, that's something I have personally been wrestling with as well, is kind of redefining my own definition of success to be more in line with what I think is success rather than what the outward world
Hmm.
says is success. And it's challenging, man. Just uh,
Hmm.
takes a lot of introspection to get to that point. But I 100% agree with everything you just said. So thank you so much for sharing that. If you had to change your name, what would you change it to?
Data professor.
Right there on the passport, data professor. I love it. Let's do one more here. What's your favorite city?
Huh. City of Angels.
Los
So
Angeles.
Los Angeles and also Bangkok.
Nice.
Yeah. So Bangkok, if you translate it in Thai, we call it Krung Thep. Krung means city, Thep means angel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Krung
That's cool.
Thep. And the English version of Krung Thep is Bangkok. And
Okay,
I've been able to live in both cities. I grew up in LA, and I was born in Bangkok.
that's cool, man. I didn't know that. That's an interesting bit of I guess coincidence there, going from one city of angels to the next.
Right.
Channing, my friend, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here. How can people connect with you? Where can they find you online if they already don't know how?
Awesome. Yeah, so I make YouTube videos, data professor and also coding professor. People could connect with me on Twitter. My tag would be the data prof. Also on LinkedIn as well. So maybe if I could provide the links to that.
Yeah, we'll definitely put all of that in the show notes so that people can connect with you. Channing, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to be here, man. I appreciate you staying up late for us and joining us today.
Right, my pleasure.
My friends, remember, you've got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big? Cheers, everyone.